The Summer of Wood, I believe, is the first book. Can you give us just kind of a summary of the series and what readers can look forward to?
Sure. So the first book is called Summer of the Woods, and it's a little bit of a treasure hunt. The brothers are going. There's a. I can hold up a picture of it there. So it's two brothers. It started off as a bedtime story that I was telling for my kids, which is funny. You start to hear this as a path that some authors kind of move into things, is especially writing for children, writing for their own kids. So started off as that, and we had moved from New Jersey about 8 years ago to Virginia. And sometimes when you move to a new place, everything's a little bit new and exciting and kind of has a sense of adventure and wonder. So we had some woods behind our house, and we started exploring around. And my kids, I have 3 boys, so they started exploring around. And so I based the beginning of that off of some of our real life experiences and some of the things I used to do as a kid and the books that I used to read. So they're looking for a treasure of an old 1877 Indian head cent, which can be really valuable. So that's kind of a treasure hunt that they're looking for. So it started from there, and then my kids seemed to like that book, even though it wasn't my original intention, and they showed it to their friends. And surprisingly, a few months later, the elementary school here in Virginia that they went to used it as their school-wide reading program. So suddenly, my first book was being read by several hundred more families, and they seemed to enjoy it. And it seemed like I kind of got onto something, especially with the Virginia piece of things. So I decided to make it into a series, which is called the Virginia Mysteries. And it really combines those two of my favorite things, some of those adventures and books that I used to read when I was a kid, with some of this fun Virginia history that I was learning about and my kids were learning about in school. So there's 7 books in the series now, and each one, especially after Summer of the Woods, they got a little bit more specifically set at different historical sites. So for example, one place that's in Richmond where I live is called St. John's Church, which is the actual building where Patrick Henry gave his famous "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech. And it's in Colonial Williamsburg, and there's books that are tied into the Civil War and some old hotels that used to have alligators that lived in the hotels and the fountains in the lobby in downtown Richmond, and big estates that had lots of interesting things. And as well as recently, I'm trying to be a little bit more targeted into what students are learning about in their social studies curriculum. So the last 2 books that I did, one is set at Jamestown. It's called Shadows at Jamestown. So that's actually been used by a lot of classrooms, especially in Virginia. The 4th grade elementary schools study Virginia history the whole year. So it's a really good fit for that particular year. So the Jamestown book was actually just picked by the Virginia State Reading Association as one of their Reader's Choice books for next year. So it's really been a good tie-in. Yeah, so not a bad thing. A good tie-in to getting it used as like a fictional complement to what classes are using in their social studies curriculum. And then the newest book is tied in a little bit more to George Washington. It's called Spies at Mount Vernon. So it takes place in DC and also at Mount Vernon. And it kind of plays up on the idea that since George Washington was a spy master, I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Turn that was out last few years, but it was filmed in Virginia. And
outstanding television show, absolutely.
Yeah, so that was fun, and kind of playing off the idea, what if there were still some spies lurking around DC and in Mount Vernon, and the characters in the books have to kind of track that down, and as they always seem to do in these stories, kind of stumble upon a mystery and go from there that they have to solve. So that's kind of the idea of how the books are set up, and I try to keep them really fast-paced and exciting. Boys and girls have enjoyed them a lot, which is great to see since I have boys, so that's kind of who I started writing for. But particularly, it's a whole nother topic, I guess, but with the reluctant readers, I have a lot of really good feedback, which tend to be a little bit stereotypically boys, a little bit more reluctant readers than girls most of the time, I find, and trying to get them into the stories and get them into reading and finding something that they think is exciting. And it's also a good gateway into history that sometimes kids can kind of come off thinking it's a little bit boring. But if you combine it with a fast-paced kind of action-adventure story, they pick it up along the way, sometimes without even noticing. So that's fun for me too.
And is there a planned ending, or are you just going on so long as you're getting readers for them?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is that there's tons of history out there. I mean, you could say that about anywhere, but Virginia is a little bit particularly chock full of history. So I always say I could probably write 200 mystery books. They're all freestanding stories. They're not like continuations. The kids get a few years older as they go along, but I don't think they're going to get past about the 11 and 13, 14 ages that they are now. So there's a lot of things, and sometimes the hardest part is narrowing it down to see what is the next story going to be about. I usually try to pick the things that get me most excited, and also can be a good tie-in to what they're teaching in schools. But that way, it keeps me interested. It's fun to go around and do the research at the different places that I set them at. So I don't know how many there'll be, but I don't plan on ending it anytime soon, since it seems to still be doing well.